Ready?
Welcome to Teaching Training Sessions 2020, organized by Sección de Idiomas de la Facultad de Humanidades USAC, Embajada de los Estados Unidos de Guatemala, en Asociación de Jóvenes Exbecarios del Departamento de Estado AGEDE. My name is Gabriela Escobar, and I'll be hosting this conference. Thank you so much for being with us. Before starting, these are some general instructions for you to follow. We will have 10 minutes for questions and answers at the end of the conference, in which I will be reading questions and comments you post directly in the live chat. Don't forget to subscribe both our channels, Idioma Susa and TTS Conferences. As you know, today this is the last day of conferences in TTS. That's why we organized a raffle, so a link will be shared in the chat for you to participate in the raffle to win a teacher's items package. Also, you can help us by giving feedback about TTS 2020. The link will be open for 20 minutes, so please participate and fill it out. And at the end of this conference, we will be sharing with you who is the winner. Again, thank you for joining us in this conference, How to Design an Educational Policy Planning Program Framework, in charge of Licenciado Jorge López, whom we warmly welcome in name of Organizing Commission of TTS 2020. His name is Jorge Gustavo López Ruiz, formación profesional, Universidad de San Carlos, Facultad de Humanidades, licenciado en Letras por la Universidad de San Carlos, Facultad de Humanidades, estudios de posgrado en la maestría en Educación Superior FAUSAC, estudios de psicología USAC, escuelas psicológicas, profesor de enseñanza media en idioma inglés, FAUSAC, conferencista en temas sobre lingüística, filosofía, teoría y crítica literaria, técnicas de enseñanza del idioma inglés y diseños curriculares. Participación en congresos pedagógicos, filosóficos y lingüísticos. Experiencia docente. Profesor titular en la Facultad de Humanidades, Departamento de Letras, Sección de Idiomas. Profesor titular de los cursos de fonología, fonética y morfología del inglés. Profesor de crítica literaria, teoría literaria, gramática del inglés, diseños curriculares, métodos de investigación, técnicas de traducción. Coordinador y profesor de inglés en colegios privados. So, Licenciado López, the time is all yours.
Thank you. Well, welcome guys to this session. For me, it is a pleasure to be here. It's been like, about 7 years. So first of all, I want to acknowledge Master Luisa Fernanda for these meetings, for these TTS session meetings, because, well, in fact, it is her baby, Now it is our baby. It is 7 years old. So I want to say congratulations to her, warming thoughts about these meetings, because we learn a lot, and we are, we have the ability and we have the opportunity to share with you guys all the knowledge that we can share, because, education is social, is teamwork. So you learn from me, but I learn from you, and I have enjoyed my classes with you. And in fact, I miss you a lot. I really miss you a lot, because you are great students, and very thoughtful and educative and educational, because you are looking for something new in our lives as well as in our society, in our country. Well, I want to show you this prize, that I got today and this week. It is from FAUSAC, because it's been 7 years for offering you guys this kind of lectures, workshops, and training. As well as I got, this nice bottle, okay? So you can hide everything you want, But don't worry because I have just water, okay? But, well, this I want to dedicate this lecture to all of you, to those people who are looking for changing in education. And guys, I know that you have been creative, you are wonderful teachers, and you are looking for always for changing education in our country as well as in around the world. Okay, so you have the abilities and the opportunities and everything in your hands now that we are changing and modifying the ways we are teaching. So because I know that you are wonderful teachers and I know that you enjoy teaching, so well, I will show you something that maybe you have thought about it, but well, you have some crazy things. Have you ever done this kind of like acting out when you want to act in front of your students? You design your classes and you are thinking carefully on what you are going to do to impress your students and enjoy with them the classes. So when you get like costumes and you need to role play with them and you act out with them as well as you enjoy teaching. But of course nowadays we don't have this opportunity. But I think that some teachers have done this kind of crazy things when they need to be like clowns. So because we enjoy teaching, so guys, this is my message today, that you are creative teachers, you are funny teachers, maybe you are crazy teachers sometimes, because you enjoy teaching. And from this reason, from this ability that you have to design, so pay attention to this keyword, design. So when you are designing your classes, so you are, planning your classes, you are designing your lesson class. So now, try to place these ideas into an educational policy. So that's one of the goals of purposes of this lecture, to show you how you can turn into a professional way to show your ideas and teaching and educational policies. All right. So talking about projects, so I'm going to show you another thing.
150 gold stars!
I didn't do it for the grade.
Give me some of that. Yeah! Yeah!
La computadora HP Pavilion All-in-One con Windows 10 está con...
¿Necesitas una página web profesional para tu negocio? Entra a wix.com y empiézalo ahora mismo.
Well, guys, well, this is kind of warm up, you know, very crazy, kind of, but it's not only about that, you know. The idea here is that, for example, we have seen, you know, like, for example, the School of Rock here, you know, remember that this wonderful teacher that tries to design a project where their kids, you know, play, you know, rock, and they set up a band, you know. So, the other one, you know, that I thought, well, I know, I'm pretty sure that you watched the movie, but here, for example, you know, like impressing your students from this kind of topics. Let's suppose that you want to design a debate discussing the issues of the contemporary American culture, you know, so how a person can turn crazy into a society where, you know, nowadays, you know, imagine that it's a little bit more difficult with the COVID-19, but imagine in a place where people suffer racism, suffer economical troubles, suffer any kind of issues to become, you know, a better person. So you could use this kind of, well, I think that you do it, you know, so when you are studying like designing your classes, so you start like imagine how you are going to make your students learn what you want to do, or make your students speak, you know, because also you have the ability to analyze dialects in English, you know, when you analyze, for example, dialect, like, for example, or accents, like British English, or posh, or Cockney, you know, which we, for example, we speak the Midwestern English, you know, the standard, okay? But when you are like analyzing these issues, you know, this is my point, my study point, when you are trying to look for new ideas, so here that is the moment that then you could turn these ideas into wonderful educational policies. Okay, so let me show you another one thing before we start, like in the matter.
El primer caso de la COVID-19 en Guatemala. Las clases presenciales fueron suspendidas en todos los niveles educativos, lo que ha llevado a profesores y alumnos a poder reinventarse en medio de la pandemia. Tal es el caso del profe Lalito 10, como cariñosamente le llaman sus alumnos, a Gerardo Amílcar Ixcoy, un joven maestro que se las ingenió para poder llevar el conocimiento hasta la casa de los pequeños, convirtiendo un triciclo en un aula móvil.
La iniciativa surge por la necesidad que estamos viviendo. Creo que tanto como los niños, como nosotros como docentes, carecemos de recursos tecnológicos para comunicarnos. Y es así como nace esta idea de comprar un triciclo y modificarlo para ir a visitar a mis estudiantes. El amor por los niños, el amor por mi trabajo. En una noche pensando qué hacer, bromeando con mi esposa, le comentaba que, amor, yo quiero inventar algo, pero ya todo está inventado. Entonces surge la idea de comprar un triciclo de segunda y lo empezamos a modificar juntamente con mi hermano. Ya no tenía las posibilidades económicas y entonces le propuse a mi hermano trabajar 2 semanas en su taller de estructuras metálicas y a cambio de eso él realizaría el trabajo de estructurar mi trici educativa o mi trici aula.
Pese a los múltiples obstáculos, Gerardo Ixcoy pedalea todos los días, más de 8 kilómetros para visitar a sus alumnos con su trici educativa, como él le llama.
La trici educativa se compone por un pizarrón, también tiene un vidrio para que no haya contacto físico con el estudiante. La idea es de que yo me quede estacionado en la puerta, en la puerta de su casa y él desde adentro reciba las clases. Y también cuenta con una varita que nos la ingeniamos con mi hermano para hacer, ahí sí que para prevenir el COVID-19 y el distanciamiento social, que es de 1 metro. Ando impartiendo los 2 cursos, matemática y comunicación y lenguaje. Asimismo, también implemento un poco lo que es quiché, que es el idioma materno de Santa Cruz, y también trato de motivar a mis alumnos impartiendo lo que es la inteligencia emocional para que ellos conozcan las emociones.
Para poder promover el distanciamiento, el profe Lalito y de un saludo muy peculiar que busca promover la creatividad entre sus alumnos.
Bueno, la varita del distanciamiento tiene una mano en la cual nos indica 5 saludos sin contacto. Una de ellas es al estilo militar. La otra es el estilo japonés, inclinar la cabeza, tailandés y el de cejas, solo mover las cejitas. Entonces eso los ha motivado mucho a ellos y también realizamos ejercicios físicos para desestresarlos un poco a ellos y también a mi persona, que me gusta mucho el ejercicio.
Gerardo Ixcoy reconoce que el apoyo de su familia y amigos han sido vital para poder llevar a cabo esta heroica labor e insta a los pequeños a no rendirse y luchar por sus sueños.
Que luchen a pesar de las dificultades. Creo que la vida es de una lucha constante, de no rendirnos, de seguir para adelante y siempre con la cara levantada para afrontar las dificultades que se vengan. Lo dije y lo sigo sosteniendo. Ellos me enseñaron y me siguen enseñando a enseñar. quiero decirles para concluir a todos los que se han tomado el tiempo de escribirme y a los que me saludan en la calle, de corazón muchas gracias. Soy un servidor más que estoy aportando un poquito, pero de corazón.
Para Primera Línea, Henry González.
Wow, guys, what do you think about it? I think that the president, the Ministry of Education should praise this wonderful teacher, because he's affording himself to teach, his children, to approach them, because nowadays that is a big problem, in Guatemala. But I think that you have noticed that nowadays, at this moment, under the COVID-19 pandemic, our students are not totally, if they have the opportunity to having classes with us as this way, not totally they are doing that. Not all the time are they online, because everyone is suffering economical problems. And imagine in rural areas where maybe you have read the newspapers, but we have known from some teachers that imagine that their parents are working and they have just like 10 quetzales to pay, to give their children, to pay like 1 hour of internet, and then send to the teachers just one kind of paperwork or some homework, because they cannot afford to all of these issues, So I show you this video from Profe Lalito, because it is an amazing idea, and I want to point it out here in my lecture on the case of educational policies as an example of what we can do at any time, when we are designing educational policies, So keep in mind this video, keep in mind his his idea, his wonderful idea, because imagine that we can turn these tricycles into, imagine that the government, the Ministry of Education, provide the rural teachers with these tricycles, and they equip, they make them with, imagine this wonderful idea. So following his idea, from this tricycle that he has, like a board, paper, notebooks, crayons, markers. But imagine that if the government afford these teachers, using this example, with computers, with internet, even they could approach, imagine that you are English teachers and you can use this tricycle wherever you are, but if you have the opportunity to teach in rural areas, and imagine that you have this equipment, to approach your students, because they don't have internet nowadays, okay? So keep in mind this idea, because I'm gonna use it in some point on this lecture, okay? So, well, let's start with matter, right? Well, guys, I'm going to start my lecture using this quote. The limits of my language means the limits of my world. So that is by Ludwig Wittgenstein, a philosophy of the analytical trend, So I like this quote because I think that we as teachers, we always work with language. And of course, the more we know, the more we use the language, the better ideas we can get, because always, language is everything, we communicate through language. Doesn't matter any language, Spanish or English, but well, you know, that is one idea, because also when we analyze education, also going to the, you know, academic field, so it is about the analysis of language, how we can turn, you know, ideas into into an academic field. So, for example, when you are writing an essay, so you need to follow some structure, some standards. So remember now that nowadays we talk about standards. So everything is about standards. So we have the structure of an essay, the structure of a review, we have the content, we have the style, we have the tone, the audience. So this is another quote, you know, long before we understand ourselves through the process of self-examination, we understand ourselves in a self-evident way in the family, society, and state in which we live. So that is by Hans-Gerd Gadamer. You know, he belongs to the hermeneutics philosophical trend. But my point here is like I wanted to present my ideas, my lecture, as a conversation, as a dialogue between you and me. Because I want to make you think on this process, okay? So how you can turn, you know, your wonderful ideas in teaching into an educational project. But also I want to, you know, like deliver this lecture to my students, because also along the lecture, I will show you some work of my students, because, you know, I've been teaching educational policies maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. You know, my students and me have done wonderful activities, learning activities, rewarding activities, and we enjoy classes. And I want to show you some of their work, some of you guys see, because I know that you are watching me now, and you are going to notice that I am very proud to show to the audience some work you have done on my classes, okay? Well, let's start with some concepts, you know, to focus on some of the points of this lecture. So let's start with planning. So planning, you know, it's a formal process of making decisions. So pay attention, because remember that we need to analyze the language, you know, so how it works, the language, because, you know, planning is one part, one idea, one part of one type of project. Also planning, you know, planning is one type of project. So analyze the language. So here is about making decisions for the future of individuals and organizations. So making decisions. So it's about a process. Also, it's a process, you know, dealing on names and objectives. So we are going to see along the lecture these words. Selecting correct strategies and programs to achieve the aims. So if you notice, it is implied on this concept what we do. You know, for example, if you are doing your EPS, for example, you notice that project, you know, it has a structure, but also you need to follow some standards, you know. So this is some ideas. Determining and allocating resources required and ensuring plans that are communicated to all concerned, because remember that that's what we call action research, because we are looking for some benefits to the group that we are approaching our project. We want them to change their behavior, to change their way of living, to change their way of working. You know, remember that is the clue for projects, you know, to modify our beneficiaries' behavior. Well, you know, at the end of these slides of this presentation, you're going to get the links for some books that I have used to design this presentation, okay, this lecture. So educational planning, so on the case of policy, so statement of aims, purposes, principles, or intentions which serve as a continuing guidelines for management in accomplishing objectives. So here remember that we have a name, so a purpose. So my point is here that along what we are doing now, so we are going to notice that we need to turn these purposes or these objectives into actions, okay, into strategies. So planning, so it is the intellectual anticipation of possible situations, the selection of desirable situations to be achieved, objectives, and the determination of relevant actions that need to be taken in order to reach those objectives at a reasonable cost. In other words, planning implies thinking about the future and trying to assume control over future events by organizing and managing resources so that they cater to the successful completion of the objectives set for. So, well, this belongs to one manual that we have used in class, you know, to practice this process. Okay, but keep in mind all of these words as I told you, because then you need to put them in practice when you design your educational project. So now, what about programs and projects? Well, programs are approved and authorized means, strategies, and details of procedures for achieving the targets. In this case, the targets are the goals, and the goals are desired ends to be achieved. So, you know, follow this logical sequence. So, you have one idea, because everything is through solving problem. Remember that John Dewey was the philosopher who, you know, designed his philosophical trend into solving problems. So applying the scientific method. But here you follow this idea. You identify a problem, then you turn this problem into a goal, okay, and then you turn this goal into a project, into a program, you know, and then into a project. So in the end, what you are looking for is to turn your wonderful ideas into results, into actions, into strategies, to make people, to make your students, to make all the beneficiaries change their way of living or their behavior. So, for example, remember that nowadays we have some programs in Guatemala. El Bono Familia, ¿qué otro? What about, we have, you know, some programs, La Bolsa Familiar. So these are programs, you know, but from these programs, we turn this into projects. So a project is a planned enterprise consisting of a set of interrelated and coordinated activities to achieve specific objectives within the limits of a given budget and a period. So, you know, projects are instruments which are derived from plans or programs, and their importance lies in the fact that through them, more specific and concrete levels are reached in a coherent and effective way. So here we have, you know, also that projects, so, you know, you have problems, you have goals, then you turn these goals into policies, then into programs, then you, from the programs you can get ideas for projects to make it, because, you know, a program is as a whole. So, you know, we follow the programs for sectors. We have the, for example, the Homeland Security sector, the health sector, the educational sector, the tourism sector. So the society is divided by sectors. So in each sector, you could identify problems, and of course you can design. So people in charge of these sectors, of course, it is mandatory they always design programs. So, but from this idea, we can identify projects. Then later, we are going to see the different kinds of projects that you can work, because in our case, well, it is related to education, but also from this type of projects. So also you can get other ideas to design your educational policies. Another definition is projects point to specific themes or areas of interest for education and enable the objectives and goals contained in the programs and plans to be achieved. So this definition is more related to education, which is our field. Now, I'm going to show you, have you ever heard about the Millennium Development Goals? Many head of governments gathered together in 2000 in the United Nations in New York, this summit, and they designed these goals. So this is like some examples of goals, but through the reading of these goals, so keep in mind that, well, they were around the world. So here, from these goals, the main issue of these goals is the globalization, so making people, or making, the beneficiaries of these goals to be part of a globalized world, because that is now the main policy, to be part of, to be a citizen of the world. So remember that we have talked about, for example, the like the goal of information. So, or the time of information, or now someone who has information has power, but these ideas gather together. But ask yourself if some of these goals have been achieved, because a goal is like a dream, but of course you are going to have some variations, some assumptions, some threats that of course could be against the goals that we can form or we can design, But goal number 1, eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, having between 1990 and 2015 the proportion of people whose income is less than $1 a day, and the proportion of people who suffer from hunger. So imagine that we have some countries like in Africa, for example, some places in Africa that people always are starving, they don't have sometimes anything to eat. So that is goal number 1. Goal number 2, achieve universal primary education by 2015. Children everywhere, both boys and girls, will be able to complete a full course of primary education. So if you notice, universal primary education, as we can see later from the Guatemalan educational policies that I'm going to share with you. So even from Mariano Galvez administration, we have this goal, the universal primary education. But now think about now. So have we reached this goal? Well, in 2019, the Ministry of Education announced that it was like 7% of dropping school from children in rural areas. So now imagine how much would be raised this percentage. So goal number 3, promote gender equity and empower women, eliminate gender disparity in primary and secondary education, preferably by 2005, and to all levels of education no later than 2015. So imagine we are now in 2020, but these Millennium Goals were developed in design in 2000, you know, because but as I told you, ask yourself if we are reaching these goals. So goal number 4, reduce child mortality, reduce by 2/3 the under 5 mortality rate by 2015. Okay, so, well, also another thing that you could see on the analysis of these goals is the sector, right? Yeah, because when we work about, or we talk about projects or programs or policies, of course we refer to sectors, right? So we can see, as I told you, the educational sector, the tourism sector. Okay, so here we are talking about the health sector. So goal number 5, improve maternal health by 2015, reduce the maternal mortality ratio by 3/4. So that was goal number 5. Goal number 6, combat HIV or AIDS, malaria, and other diseases. Halt to spread and begin to reverse the incidence of HIV and AIDS and other diseases. So, you know, that is goal number 6. Goal number 7, ensure environmental sustainability, build sustainable development policies. So here we can see that also, remember that also in our faculty, we promote environmental programs or projects, you know. So you have noticed that it would be like, for example, imagine this kind of project. Let's suppose that you want to practice English with your kids and you are living in a rural area or living in a touristic place such as, well, Atitlan Lake, for example, but everywhere. Imagine that you want to, your goal, your idea is to promote in your students the idea of saving the environment. So you could design some projects like, for example, I'm practicing through English, so the students can, you know, like make billboards or posters or painting promoting, you know, like saving the world. So, well, this some, you know, on the way I will telling you some ideas to focus on how to design projects from policies. Okay. Goal number 8, develop a global partnership for development. So that's the key, you know, like the ideas, the principal ideas of these goals, you know, to promote the globalization. So think about if it is good or not. So, you know, well, now let's talk about, well, right now I'm going to show you a little bit context of, in our case, of the educational sector, the Guatemalan educational sector, how educational policies have been developed. I will try to be briefly in this case because it's not the point, but I want you to see a whole picture, because if you want to become policy designers, of course you need to know about educational policies and of course in our country. So let's start with Mariano Galvez administration. I want to focus here on this part because here we can see as an illustration, as an example, how educational policies work. Because you design an educational policy when you see a problem, a condition, and you want to turn this condition into another way. Well, we could say to solve a problem, you know, to solve a solution. So imagine that at this time, so one of the educational policies was that education should be secular. So here, you know, it was an impact, because remember that according to a PhD Artemis Torres from the historical faculty, so she says that our country has been classified according to the ideas in 3 ways: the pre-Hispanic, which of course we are talking about the Mayan. So remember that in our country is divided by four. Well, we can list these ethnicities. And this moment we have Creoles, and we have Spaniards, and we have Mayans, indigenous people, and we have mestizos. So at this time. So talking about Torres, Artemis Torres, she says that Guatemala has been divided in this case, pre-Hispanic, metaphysic, and positivistic, So pre-Hispanic, we're talking about before the colonization, along the colonization, we can talk about metaphysics, because, in the case of the colonization, remember that here the church was the one who, of course, was in charge of everything. Because when we talk about educational policies, we need to merge economy, labor, life, beliefs. So it is a mix, So here, of course, this educational policy belongs to a change in their beliefs, in the beliefs of these people. Because here, remember that the church was the one who possesses the lands, who designs the policies, and this is what. And remember that. So this policy was against this position, because when we say secular, so it is the opposite of Christian or Catholic, So here it was an impact. Another idea is compulsory. So in this case, primary education was compulsory. So imagine that we still have these kind of policies alive, because here we can see some reforms, right? But again, following the ideas of, PhD Artemis Torres, so she says that, we have pre-Hispanic before the colonization. And then we have the metaphysics, because at this time, so from that concept, scholasticism, the scholasticism, so scholastic. So from this concept, we have the etymology of school. Because, the scholasticism, it was part of the medieval philosophy, but it was not just a philosophy, it was a way of teaching who uses dialectics. And remember that dialectics was part of the tribune, where we have the grammar, the dialectics, and the rhetoric. But in the case of the dialectics, which is about, like the thesis, the antithesis, and the synthesis. So they use this kind of teaching because it was about reading as well as analyzing what they read. But they read mostly Aristotle, and here the idea was to combine Aristotle's philosophy with Christian beliefs. But my point here is that Mariano Galvez policies is, like changing this status. So he saw a problem. He says, well, and remember that at this moment when we have the positivism, which is against, these beliefs, because remember, mostly the French positivism from Auguste Comte, which science was the one who would tell us the things that we can do. So also remember that we have the, for example, the French Revolution, and here we have the alignment, during the alignment with the ideas of, like human, the man have the power, to change their world. So through science. Another thing was free access. So imagine that also this is part of the Constitution as well. So I want to point it out this because here you can see the, like the changing ideas when we design policies, because we identify a problem. And of course, we need to solve this problem. Okay, but one, of course, we are going to have some threats when we design a policy. That is called in the logical framework assumptions, because there are some threats that could break or could, like obstacle our projects, but well, this is like a simple idea. And then we have, but in the end, talking about the ethnicities that we have in our country. So here, in the end, it has an indigenous assimilationist ideology. What it means? That we have the, the indigenous people at this moment, but of course, their school is, also for them. But here the problem is that we receive the Eurocentrism, the Western culture, from Europe. And at this moment, so it was thought that that was the civilization. So here, these people didn't have any right, any vote, any word to say. So they need to assimilate the Western culture, and that will be different later, but at this moment, let's say that we have an assimilationistic ideology. Now, then we have the revolutionary regime. Remember, that was wonderful. We have many changes that you know, that still we have. Okay, I'm going to be brief, on these issues because I'm going to focus more on the educational policies, okay? But here, remember that we turn into the Guatemalan nationality, right? Because remember that here there is a change of many things in Guatemala, in rights, in economy, of course. But here in the Nayari, integration and cultural relativism. Here still, pay attention to these words because that is the key word of these educational policies, that because we have the problem of land as well as the problem of the ethnicities, because remember that we have Garifunas, we have Mayans, we have Mestizos, and we have Xincas, okay? But at this moment, so compare nowadays, because now we talk about cultural diversity, linguistic dominance, we talk about language diversity, we talk about, not only about integration, but also about having a place, right? So now, at this moment, also another characteristic of this kind of educational policy was that the education was centralized. But now, from the CMB, from all the changes that we have, that we are going to see later, the curriculum was decentralized. What it means that, for example, if you know Xinca, so the goal, the policy is that you should teach your kids the Xinca language. If you know any Mayan language, of course, it will be better to teach your kids in your Mayan language, okay, so you got the idea? So, well, here we have, I'm going to show you like a chronology of some important dates, you know, regarding TC2C to get into an idea of our educational policies. But here we have the accord and the identity and rights of the indigenous communities. So that was in March 31, 1995. So remember that it was like the signing, you know, of almost the end of the conflict, of the war conflict in Guatemala. The Guatemalan government decree of the educational reform design, you know, that is part of these agreements that was issued, you know, in 1997. So here, you know, all the parties got involved and they tried to design an educational reform. And also it's a document, okay, so you could read as well this document. Here we have some other facts like the basis of the Guatemalan education from these years, from 1971 to 1979, the educational plan for the Guatemalan Republic through 1975-1979, the national plan for the educational development sector, 1979-1982. So imagine that here, well, at least some authorities have paying attention to some changes in our education sector. The National Education Law issued in June 1979, which still use it. Regulations of the National Educational Law issued in November 1977. Legalization of the educational programs, July 1978. Well, here we have through the military dictatorship, you know, from these years. Here we have the el diseño de reforma educativa, which is, well, sometimes remember that you can say, well, yeah, but everything is on paper. But of course, but at least, you know, it has been a decree, it has been officially, so even when you are designing any kind of policy, so you could refer to these documents. And then we have the CMB. Well, guys, you know, by the way, I really love the CMB design because, you know, it has a wonderful design. Even though it was designed by Chileans, by some Chilean scholars here in Guatemala. But nowadays, you know, it's something like a paradox. But now the Chilean curriculum would be similar to our CMB. But now they turn into objectives. They are not too much crazy about competencies, you know, because in the end, sometimes competencies refer to like a human resource manager, where you need to design a profile of, yeah, because, you know, also belongs to the globalization, you know, belongs to the goals of the Millennium, where we need to make our students be part of the world, which also is good, of course. Also, we have the 21st century skills, remember? So from this reason, we have also the common European framework. So we have several, because nowadays we talk about standards, right? Well, now talking about the characteristic, I want to point it out here because I want to make you have a better picture of an educational policy. Okay, so here are some characteristics of the CMB. So the perfectibility. So remember that education, well, that is because, you know, education is a craft. It's similar to painting, to sculpture, because you design, you have a plan in your mind. And of course, it has a purpose, okay, but it's not okay, it is a never-ending story. So you always, because you are teachers, I'm a teacher as well, but also we are students, you know, I'm learning from you. We learn from each other and we teach each other, you know. So if nowadays, remember that we have some digital webinars where they tell you that if you know one wonderful idea, you can turn this wonderful idea into a digital form and you can sell it. Well, it's wonderful. Okay, so if you can do it, you can, well, let's do it. All right. So flexibility. So remember that, well, education should be flexible. So that is the opposite of traditional planning and strategic planning. Because now when we talk about strategic planning, so we talk about flexibility in planning, so we can modify, and that is part of the evaluation, okay? Integrity, so of course, here we talk about that, talking about the skills, the competences, the content and everything. Participatory, because you know all people could participate in learning and teaching as well. So in the opposite of other, you know, regimes where the traditional planning was technocratic, so it was just a group of people or which have the power to decide. But now it's supposed that we are living in a democratic way, you know. So here's we have, so pay attention to these educational policies in the CMB. So encouragement of the equal opportunities for all the peoples of Guatemala. So we talk about equality, you know, which is part of the also the Millennium Goals. Focus on the training of productivity and efficiency. Well, imagine, this is what I mean. That, of course, here we're talking about the skills. But guys, imagine that if we have this policy and the CMB, I don't know, maybe you know, but I think there should be like a center which would be in charge of this, if it is the goal, you know, if it is the policy, to design the appropriate skills for the field. So should be part of you know, for specialists, you know, let's say scholars, but it should be a sector, you know, it should be a section in the educational, in the Ministry of Education, which would be like a figure, you know, like when we say, for example, the Ministry of Labor, so it should be, if it is a goal, so it should turn into a program, you know, and we need to design like, for example, a sector which revises the necessary skills if we are following this model, right? So encouragement to develop the development of science and technology, of course, you know, and now more than this time, you know, now we need, imagine that now. So that's another, imagine this scenario. So have you ever wondered when we say homecoming, when soldiers went to work and they are coming home, like for example the Vietnam War, and imagine the impact when we say the post-traumatic stress, you know, when they come home, so we say homecoming. But now we should talk about school coming. So have you wondered about this scenario after the COVID-19 pandemic? So how the classes will be, you know, developed, will be turned into. Imagine that we don't have, so there are some places where there is not enough pot water, you know, or for example the space. So imagine that before this pandemic, so there were some crowded classes where you have, for example, like 40 students, or imagine sometimes in our faculty in vocational courses when we have like some almost 100 or 150. So have you ever wondered about this school coming? So of course education would be changed, would be modified, you know, the way. Okay, but well, let's continue. CMB educational principles: equity, relevance and appropriateness, sustainability, cultural and linguistic diversity, pluralism, social commitment and engagement. So if you notice these educational principles from the CMB have followed a standard, principle. Okay, so because it belongs to the globalization. Okay, but then we have educational goals, ensuring that all children, particularly to go a little bit faster. Now this is the one time that I wanted to share with you the ideas, because when you have a goal, so you could turn and pay attention to the language. You could turn this goal into into an educational policy. So here, ensuring that all children, particularly girls, children in difficult circumstances, and those belonging to ethnic minorities, have access to and are able to complete primary education that is free, compulsory, and qualified. So this is my point, that you need to change to turn this your ideas into this type of drafting. So here is about making educational policies. So here another one, achieving a 50 improvement in levels of adult literacy by 2020, especially for women, and equitable access to basic and continuing education for all adults. Another one, educational goals, access to and completion of free and compulsory primary education in rural areas of Guatemala. Improving all aspects of the quality of education. Improving the learning experience and the success of learners, improving the progress of learners at risk of educational disadvantage of learners with special educational needs. But now here, guys, this is a principal point that I want to focus, and then here, while I am a little bit concluding, you identify a problem, and I'm focused on this problem because it's our, our moment. But here, problem, the increasing of children drop out from school in rural areas in Guatemala along the COVID-19 pandemic. Goal, so we turn this problem into a goal, which should be part of should be, when it is a part of educational policy, is because it becomes as a plan action, national plan action. Okay, so it has to be also, we are talking about funds, resources, but imagine here, we turn the problem into a goal, preventing the children's schooling dropout in rural areas along the COVID-19 pandemic. Then, we turn this goal into a specific purpose, to contribute to reducing children's schooling dropout through providing teachers of rural areas with the necessary resources for teaching. And then here, outputs. So here is when I want to get from Professor Lalito idea. So imagine that that's what I told you before, that his idea should be praised by the president, by the University of the San Carlos University. His wonderful idea, because we imagine that we turn this idea into an educational policy, because I think that it could be, well, you can think that it could be rustic, but you can add more other ideas to this basic but workable wonderful idea of approaching his students in rural areas. So, well, the last time that I read, he said that he was like about 10 students that he visited, or he usually visits like about 10 students. But imagine that the Ministry of Education provides tricycles to these areas equipped with, what do we say, instead of, well, he uses a board, but imagine that if the Ministry of Education provides these teachers also with these tricycles, a computer, a laptop computer, provide them, well, here is another dealing, because they could deal with Tigo or with Claro to provide these teachers. So you know what I mean? This is how you need to start, like having ideas to turn these goals into outputs. Okay. So imagine that this tricycle could have a computer, and of course you could reach your students with this tricycle wherever they are, but of course you have internet. So what do you think? So this is the case that we need to, well guys, I don't know if I still have more time, but I don't know if it is time for questions. How much time do I have still? Javi?
Okay, so we still have 15 more minutes. So if someone has a question, you can write it on the chat, and for sure we will be reading the questions.
So I have 15 minutes more?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well,
you're welcome.
Let's continue. Well, now, I want to conclude on this case to show you some ways that you can turn your educational, because my point first was show you the way, here you need to apply, and the designing of educational policies, you need to apply your critical thinking, okay? So you need to start. So imagine that I show you several ways, from identifying a problem, then to a goal, and then to a purpose, and then to an output. But then, of course, following some frameworks, we have, for example, the activities. Okay, then we need to add the budgets, and then we need to add some other resources. But on the web, you could research, for example, for some tool that could be helpful. So, of course, you have the SWOT analysis. Well, you need to analyze the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats, okay? What I notice is that sometimes students do it at random. It's like they do it like a brainstorming, but it's not a brainstorming, so you need to follow some guidelines. Nowadays, everything is about guidelines, everything is about standards. So you could research, and of course, your challenge is to dominate, to analyze, to use these tools. So this is the SWOT analysis that I know that you have used it. Another one is the example of a problem tree. So remember that is to make your, because you need to present. Remember that when you are a project designer, so you are supposed to do like a salesperson. So you need to sell your idea, and of course you need to follow some standards, like some frameworks, to place them in a more professional way. So here is the tree problem. So in the case of the tree problem is that you place in the center the problem, and then you identify causes and effects, okay? So here we have low farm productivity. Remember that we talk about sectors. So here, so imagine that it's a tree. So in the center you have the trunk, and the causes are the roots, and the effects are the leaves, or the branches. But it has this logical way. So here the clue is that you need to identify causes and effects. Another one is the fishbone diagram. So this is the one that I want to share with you, because this one was designed for one of my students in seminar. So I really like this fishbone diagram, which follows the same principle. So you have in the center a problem or an objective, and then you have causes and effects. That is another. But of course, here you apply, because remember that a project is teamwork. So even it is not individually done. So even though you do it, for example, as part of your EPS, but of course you need to consult some specialists depending on the kind of the problem you need to solve, right? But of course you need to look for specialists, and of course you place it into your inform, okay, into your report. Another one is, well, this is the fishbone in Spanish as well, but you can use it for any field, in education, in the educational sector, in the health sector, you know. Another one is, this one belongs to our faculty. You know, this is the framework that you use for your EPS, you know. So remember that you start with diagnosis, the theoretical framework, the project profile. So remember that even also it is the same design for the seminar, all right? So we follow the same idea. But if you notice, for example, here when we are on the diagnosis, so here is the place where we identify a problem and we try to find a solution. Okay, so here we try to gather all the information, and here at this time, at this kind, we can use also we can use the tree problem. Okay, when we need to identify a problem and then looking for some solutions. Of course, we have the theoretical framework, the project profile, which here is the design, you know, and the project profile is when you design. Remember that you identify a problem, but then you design your project. So here, the seminar as well as the EPS is divided by 5 chapters, which is this chapter, you know. Then we have the project implementation. But of course, on each, this is like a framework, you know, like key concepts. But of course, in each part, in each chapter, you could follow some frameworks, some tools, all right? So that's also the idea. The project implementation, which also we have the execution and the project evaluation. But also, well, another, because you know, a project is a theory, you know, it's a theory. And also you need to, because it's similar to the scientific method. So you design a theory and then you need to evaluate, you need to analyze if the theory is working. So that's why you need to evaluate each chapter, you know. So the diagnosis, you need to evaluate what you have done on this diagnosis chapter. You need to evaluate your theoretical, because you know everything is also evaluation, even and any kind of tool you need to evaluate. For example, if you are using a problem tree framework, also you could, because remember that is not a never-ending story, a process of designing or implementing or executing projects. Also, you need to evaluate if it is working, all right? So, you know, also we have the PEST analysis, okay, which also it is used at the faculty in some parts, you know. For example, we have political factors when well, in these cases, when we talk about the 8 sectors, you know, but this idea comes from the United States or from the English, you know, conventions. But here we talk about, you know, in the faculty, at the FAUSAC faculty, we talk about 8 sectors, but here you have the 6 sectors, but of course, you know, it's about analyzing sectors. Okay, so here we have the political factors, the economic factors, social factors, technological factors, legal factors, environmental factors. So, you know, nowadays, as I told you, it is better to use matrices or frameworks to standardize more your work. Of course, then you need to narrate. Because, for example, an example that I gave you before on the, you know, in the case of preventing the school dropping of students nowadays along the COVID-19 epidemic. So then you need to narrate, of course. You need to narrate the situation. So here, when we start narrating, for example, the student situation, what they are dropping out and why, or maybe they are not going to come back to school. Because I think that you have noticed that nowadays students are working with their parents, right? So imagine that you need to narrate these situations, you know? So you have the matrix, but then of course you need to narrate. Also we have the Gantt chart. And here we have the logical framework word matrix, which is a good tool, you know, where you have in a glance how your project would turn into, and you could evaluate. So remember that in the case of the goals, so here is the where you start, which is it is about hierarchy. So first of all, you place here the goal, the principal goal of your, as I told you. So here is preventing. You can use preventing, increasing, providing. So you could use the, but remember that the goal is the higher objective, which is part of which could turn into a policy. Okay, so then the purpose is more specific. As I told you before, you set up with, like, for example, the goal like preventing the dropping of kids, you know, in rural areas. Then you have a purpose. Okay, so this is about like breaking the goal into, you could have, so also the clue here is that you need to follow just one purpose. Okay, it's not about drafting like 3 purposes. So in the case, like, for example, in the case that the first one, so remember that you could say, for example, providing the students with the teachers in rural areas with the necessary resources. So here is a lot more specific. And then the outputs, well, and here in the outputs you could divide, because here is like the results, the products. Here, for example, the computer, a laptop computer, well, if we follow the Professor Lalito idea, which is a wonderful idea, as I told you. So first of all, the tricycles, but also the boards, the markers, everything that you can see in his tricycle. But also we are thinking, you know, you could use your imagination, your creativity, and you can think of more wonderful resources more than the tricycle if you could think other ideas. But here the purpose is to provide them or to contribute, you know, to the main goal, which is the reduction of preventing, you know, the reduction of students along the pandemic, as well as, well, we can say along the pandemic and after the pandemic. Okay, so but here on the output, so you need to like refer to the, you know, like the principal result that you need to, and also you need to apply the if and then. Because, for example, here activities, so here activities are the actions, but for example, if you say, so here is also the principal action research hypothesis, how it turns work. Because activities, for example, if you say, if the City Hall of Quiché provides teachers with tricycles to teach in rural areas, then, you know, the goal is going to be, or the purpose is going to be achieved. So here we have if and then. So first the goal, the purpose, the outputs, and the activities. So here, for example, if Tigo, if Tigo provides internet to these teachers, so they could equip their tricycles with internet in their computers, you know. So this is the way how it works. So guys, I think that I have finalized this topic, this lecture. I think that the time is not enough, even though we have a 1 hour and a half, but it's about teamwork. So my goal, my purpose is to leave you with some ideas about educational planning frameworks, which of course you could practice. All right, guys, so it's been a pleasure to be with you, and I wish you the best. Okay.
Thank you so much, Licenciado, for this amazing conference. We have some questions we'd love you to answer. So these are some of the questions participants wrote in the chat. The first one says, should the CNB change in order to accomplish the competences in a non-technological environment?
Let me think. Well, here, remember that you have the word competences, okay? As well as competencies. But remember that competencies are referred to what students are doing or they are supposed to do, or what their profile after the teaching, For example, let's suppose that if we talk about, for example, let's say accountants or teachers or secretaries or even other words like, for example, in the case of, well, any field. But here the clue is like, remember that as designing, when we design, of course, we need to design the goal, the objective, all right? So the competencies and competences are for the students, but I think that if we want to be more professionalized in the teaching field, so we are supposed to design educational policies that could be applied to any kind of situation that like nowadays. So here is the moment that we need to think in other strategies to reach our students, because it's wonderful if we have internet, it's wonderful if we have time, it's wonderful if if we have everything at hand. But what about the people who don't have these disadvantages? So here is the moment where we need to design, as I told you before, with following Professor Lalito idea, that we need to think about strategies about the students coming back to school. Okay, so of course we could think about from the side of teachers, we as teachers, what we are going to do, if we are still working the same way, or if there are going to be changes. Of course, it will be change, right? But here is the moment that, of course, it is about thinking about any changes, But that's my point, that, of course, you don't need to also not to focus only on competencies. Or there are other things, like strategies or resources, Well, I don't know if I answered the question.
Thank you so much, Licenciado. We have another question. It says, do you think that the CMB must be designed different?
Be designed differently. Well, as I told you, the CMB was designed by Chileans, people, scholars from Chile. And you could read on the web the Chilean CMB. And you are going to, even the Colombian one. So, because it was part of a project that belonged to the beginning of this century, after the summit, the goals that I show you. But here, the keywords, as I told you, is globalization. So that's why we receive the 21st century skills, and they are based on competencies. But of course, imagine at this moment, the competencies should be redesigned. Because of course, if we revise them, some of them wouldn't be applied if under the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, because they are going to be modified. But regarding the question, I think that like going to the point, it's not about design. Again, it is the keyword here is redesign. So we have the CMB, but of course it needs to be modified, but it's a base, and I think it's a wonderful base, and you can use, because a project is a never-ending story. So it is a new stuff. So from the CMB, of course, could be redesigned, and it must be redesigned nowadays, because it has to be revised. But according to the theoretical framework of projects, so we have short-term projects, mid-term projects, and long-term projects. So a short-term project could be like about 1 year. A mid-term project would be like 5 years, and a long-term project would be like 20 years. So nowadays, imagine that the CMB started almost in the 2000, so it has like about 20 years. So it should be, of course, modified,
Thank you so much. And now we have the final question. It says, do you think there must be bilingual principals and coordinators?
Of course, yeah. Even, I don't know exactly, but of course, people in charge in the Ministry of Education should, of course, there is a linguistic institute that belongs to the Ministry of Education, where people should speak, for example, Mayan languages or English. But imagine, so going back to this question, so imagine that an educational policy issued by the Ministry of Education that says like this way. For example, increasing I'm talking about specific in English, increasing the English speaking skill and the students of Guatemala. So that is the goal. But imagine that into the purpose we include, like in a simple way, that we include the communicative approach, okay, which is now is not like a modern, which is workable, but I'm giving just this example. So from here, so a section of the Ministry of Education should be built, which the purpose is to evaluate that all the schools are using the communicative approach, so that in that case the students are reaching the ability to speak in English, which is wonderful. But even we're still trying, sometimes that our students don't speak English most of the time. But imagine this goal, that it should be part of an educational policy, that all children should speak English, and even we could place a rate, like 80% of accuracy. So it wouldn't be that wonderful?
You're totally right. Thank you so much for answering those questions. Thank you again for solving those questions and taking the time to share this information with us.
Okay.
Right now, for our dear audience, the form for attendance is being shared in the chat. So please make sure to fill it with your information and the one shared in every single conference you attended. This is how we're going to sum up your hours of participation for your diplomas. And the attendance form will be open for 10 more minutes. So now it's time for the raffle. For the raffle, I will use a tool, a random picker name. So let's see who is the winner. Okay, so here we have all the names of the participants who filled out the form. Now let's see who's the lucky one.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a winner. The name is Rosa Verónica Archila Flores. So congratulations, Rosa Verónica. You will be receiving an email well, in which we are going to ask you for more information so that you can receive your prize. And thank you so much again for your participation in this TTS. This has been all for today and for this conference. So we thank you so much for your participation in Conferences 2020. We appreciate your comments, your feedback, and we hope to see you in our next TTS 2021. We really hope this TTS could be useful for you. So dear teachers, keep on doing your best in every single class as we are sure you are doing. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon. And Licenciado Lopez, thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Okay, bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.